Welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel and I hope you enjoy this video. So in the previous videos we've talked about getting data from the NHL, primarily from the NHL API. In this video we want to get data from the PWHL. So we need to scrape the data from the PWHL website. This will be the final video about getting data. Then in the coming videos we'll talk about cleaning data, transforming data, and we'll do all that in MySQL. But in this video we are going to get data, we're going to scrape data from the PWHL. Now we are working with the PWHL here, but you could easily do the same thing for the AHL. It's the same stats provider, so it's the exact same process. But I've just opened the PWHL website and let's take a look around here. So the first thing we want to get is we want to get the schedule for all teams. And the easiest way to get that is to select a specific team. We could just pick Boston and click on schedule. So here it has the schedule of all Boston's games, but we're interested in all teams. So we'll just select all teams. And this is the schedule for the regular season in 2024. Now, one thing that's worth noting is that it says 1 here. So this is the season ID. And this is important to take note of because it's not very obvious, but in this case, this season ID equals 1 means it's the regular season in this 2024 season. So if we select preseason, you can see it changes to 2. And if we select the playoffs, it changes to 3. So today we are only interested in 1 and 3. We are only interested in the regular season and the playoffs. Okay, so this is it. So what we're interested in is getting this data. So let's just select regular season again. So we're interested in getting this table right here with all of this data. However, you can't just copy this URL and put it into Excel. That won't work. But what we can do is we can right click and go to inspect. Now this is in Danish, but it should say inspect on your computer. And then we need to go to network and look at JavaScript. And there's nothing here because we need to reload the page. But once we do that, we'll get a few links here that holds all the information that we're interested in. So when you're looking at the PWHL or the AHL websites, what you're interested in is these index pages here. So there's a lot of information here. Some of these you can't use. Those with a bootstrap doesn't work. But what we are interested in here is this one. So this URL right here holds all the information that we're actually interested in. Now there's a callback, Angular callbacks thingy in the end. We don't want that, so we'll just copy the URL from here. And we can just try and put it in and see what happens. So you can see here that this looks a lot like a JSON file, a JSON format. And there's a lot of information here and it's very difficult to extract just by looking at it. But generally speaking, this is a JSON. There's just a parentheses in the beginning and there's a parentheses in the end that won't work because that means that Excel or Power Query can't load the data as JSON file. But we'll we'll get to that part. But generally speaking, all the information is right here. We can just change the season. Right now it says 1. If we change that to 3, then we'll get the playoff data. So those are the URLs that we're going to need. Okay, so let's just go to Excel now. And I want to build a table with the URLs that we need to get the scheduling. We could just get the schedule and then append with another URL, but it's easier to put it all in a table and then do a function and then invoke that function on a column, just like we did in the previous videos. It's the exact same process. So let's just create a table here. So we want a table that holds the season ID, and we know right now that what we're interested in is 1 and 3. 1 for regular season, 3 for playoffs. Let's just put in the season as well. Let's say it's 2023, 2024, just to be consistent with the formatting style, even though all games were being played in 2024. The season started in January. And finally, let's put in season states as well, because this information you can't get from the data, so you just have to know based on which season ID we're calling. So let's just say regular and playoffs. So this means when the next season starts, you just add the new season ID to this table that we're building right here. So it will likely be number 4 and then 24, 25 season and regular, once we're adding new information. But for now we only have these 2 rows here, so it's going to be a very little table, a very small table. But if we were to do this with the AHL, you would have a lot more season IDs and a lot more seasons, generally speaking. So the last thing we want to do is we want to just add a link with the URLs. So let's just copy this link right here. Actually, let's make it into a table first. So let's just make it into a table. And then in here, we're going to say equals to the URL. But then instead of having the season equals 3, we'll just put in the season ID column. So we're going to just say season ID and just like that. So this means that now when you're going to add a new season, you just fill out these 3 columns here and this one will automatically update. Okay, so that's it. This is what we need in order to get our schedule for the 23-24 season in the PWHL. So just like we did last time, we'll just add this table to the data model so that we can work with it in Power Query. And actually we'll just rename this to schedule. So now we need to create a function that we can invoke on this column right here. So we'll just select one of these, doesn't matter which one. And we'll try to load this in order to create a temporary table that we can use to create our function. So we'll just go to web. This is exactly what we did with the NHL API. But when we hit enter here, it won't work. This is because Power Query is trying to load this data as a JSON input. But because you have those parentheses in the beginning and in the end, it won't work. So we have to load it not as a JSON file, but as a text file. I'll just hit OK. So now it's just loaded as a text file, and now we can remove the parentheses and then we can pass it as a JSON. So we'll just add a new column. We'll use the text middle function, so it takes the middle part of the text. I don't think you can use the text between delimiters and then just take the parentheses, because there might be parentheses within quotes as well in the text. So we have to do it this way. So this way we're taking the middle part of the text. So we're going to select the text, column 1, and then we're going to say the start value has to be 1, because in Power Query you start counting from 0, so number 1 is actually the second character. So we're going to ignore the first one and start at the second one. And then the count of characters we're taking is going to be the count of the full text minus 2, because we don't want the first parentheses and we don't want the second parentheses. So for that we're going to use the length, text length function, and just take the text. So this just counts how many characters are there in this text in total, and then we're going to say minus 2. So now it should work. So now we've created a new column where the opening and the ending parentheses aren't there. So now we can do this. So we can say right click, drill down, and now we have the entire text without parentheses in the beginning and in the end. So this means that now we can pass it as a JSON file. And once we've done that, we can make it into a table. And now we can start extracting data from this JSON file. But we don't want to do that just yet. We just wanted to create a function that does all of this. So it loads it as a text file, then it removes the parentheses, and then it passes it, then it loads it as a JSON file and converts it into a table. So this is what we want our function to do. So now we just need to create the function, and we did this in the previous videos as well. So we need to create a new parameter. We can call this one link schedule. It's a text, and we'll just put in the URL. And then we can go to the source code here and change this from a fixed URL and just put in the link schedule. And then now we can create a function based on this table and the parameter. So we just say create function, function schedule. And now we created the function that we are going to need. So this table right here is just a temporary table that we created in order to create our function. So we'll just delete this one. And now we have a function that we can invoke on this column right here. So we'll just say invoke custom function. And it works. So now we can just expand this. And obviously the data is not quite as clean here as it was when we called the NHL API. But it does work and all the data is in here. So we'll just expand it. And we'll just expand sections. We'll expand to new rows. And there are 3 columns here. I already know, because I worked with this before, that all the relevant information is in the data column. So let's just expand the data column, and then we can expand to new rows. And then again, I know all the relevant information is in the row column, so let's just pick that one. And now we can expand it, and it has all of the schedule data that we're interested in. So let's just start off by expanding all of them, then we can look at it. So what we have here is we have the game ID, we have the date. Now the problem is that the date doesn't have a year. So we will probably have to add the year based on our season column here. But in this case it works, because if there is no year here, then it just assumes that it's the current year. So for now we'll just leave it as it is, because it works in this particular case. But when we're going to the next season and we're going to add new data, then at some point it will be a problem. Now you have how many goals did the home team score, how many goals did the away team score, and you have this if necessary. I don't know what this means, but it just says 0 all the way, so we'll just remove that column. And also in the end you have just these columns, just says game report, game sheet, game summary, not really relevant. Broadcasters, there's nothing there. So let's just remove the columns that aren't relevant. So let's go and remove those if necessary. Yep. So we'll just remove those, and now we can let's just change the names a little bit. So we'll call this one game ID, call this one game date. I think in the NHL data we call this home score, away score, game status, that's fine. Let's call this one home team, away team, and I think that's fine. So let's just select everything and go to detect data type. And now you can see the date column here is correct. It just filled in 2024 and it works. So let's just leave it as it is. It will be a problem if you have more than one season worth of data and the date isn't this current year, then there will be problems. Anyway, other than that, it works fine. So this is our schedule data. We could just remove the link column, not really. Could also remove the season ID. I don't think that's particularly interesting. So let's just remove those. Season ID and link. And this is our schedule table. So we found this one. So that part of the video is now done. So let's go back to the PWHL page. And the next thing we want to get is we want to scrape play-by-play data. And we also want to scrape player information and time on ice data. So if we go here to the stats part of the PWHL, you will see there is information about plus minus and points and so on, but there's no time on ice information here. So we can't just get the data from the stats page. We're going to get the data from the game reports instead. So we're going to get play-by-play data for each game, and then we're going to get time on ice data for each game as well. I hope it will make sense in a little bit. So now let's just select a random game, it could be this one, and go to the game center. And then there's a lot of information here. Now what we're interested in is this table right here, because we're interested in the time on ice. And then we're also interested in this right here. We're interested in play-by-play data with shot location. So we're not really particularly interested in goals and assists and shots from this table, because we can get that data from the play-by-play data anyway. But we're gonna need this time on ice here. Now the problem with the PWHL and the AHL is that they do have time on ice, but they don't have it based on strength state. So we don't know how much time each player played at even strength and how much time each player played at power play and shorthanded and so on. But we can at least get the time on ice per game from this data. So we'll just do exactly like we did before. So we'll right click and say inspect, go to the network tab, and we'll just reload the page. And then we have all of these index links here. So again, I know that they are in the bottom. So this one holds information about the play-by-play. This one, yeah, we can just show it actually. Let's do that. So this one is just a list of all the teams that played in that season. We're not gonna take that information now, but it might be interesting. Might be worth doing in another situation. So this just gives us information about each team. But we'll just ignore that one for now. What we're also interested in is the game summary here. So let's start off by taking this one. Again, we don't want all of this callback, so we'll just ignore that. Take this part of the URL, and again, we can open it. And it looks like a JSON file. Difficult to extract any useful information from this, but it does have information about each player. It has name and position and birthday. We're interested in that information. And it also has the time on ice somewhere in there. So let's just copy this one. And then let's go back here. So we want to get the game summary for all of the games in our schedule table. So we'll actually just duplicate this one. And we'll call this one players. And then we'll just remove some of the columns here, because we're not really interested in the home score and away score. So we'll just let's just remove these. And then we can use this to get the game summaries. Let's make this into text. Let's just go back here. So in this URL right here, the only input that we are going to use is the game ID. Game ID equals 2. Game ID equals 2. So we're just going to need this input from this column right here. Other than that, and we can use that to create URLs that we can then invoke a function on in order to get the game summaries. So we'll just start off by creating a column here. Let's just put in the URL, and then instead of having game ID equals 2, we'll say game ID equals the game ID column. And that's it. So now we have a URL for each game. And then we just need to create a function that we can invoke on this column right here. So let's just do exactly what we did before. Copy this one, load it from web. And again, it's gonna say that there's an error because there are parentheses in the beginning and in the end, so it can't load it as a JSON input. So again, we'll just load it as a text file. And then we'll remove the parentheses using the text middle function. And the length function -2. Then we'll say drill down. And now we have the text in JSON format, and we can pass it as a JSON file. And now we have the information that we can use. Okay, so there's quite a lot of information here. You have details. We're not going to use this for now. You might want to do something with the attendance or something, but what we are interested in today is just the home team and the visiting team. So these two records right here have information about all the players and coaches and goaltenders. So these two are the ones that we are interested in. So let's just convert this into a table, and then just let's only keep this row and this row. So we'll just go keep rows, range of rows, and say the first one is 7, and we only want to keep 2 rows. So now we have game summary for the home team, game summary for the away team, and this is what we want our function to do. So again, the function loads the link as a text file, removes the parentheses, passes it as a JSON file, and converts it into a table, and removes all the rows that we're not interested in. So that's what our function should do. So now we'll just make it into a function. So we need to create a new parameter. Let's call it link players. Put in the URL. Change the source to the parameter link players. That's it. Now we can create a function. Let's call it function players. And now we can remove this, delete this table, because it was just one that we created in order to create our function. So let's just say delete. And this means that we have a function that we can invoke on this particular column. So let's do that. And then we can open, extract, expand the tables. And you can see here home team, visiting team, and we can expand this. And there's a lot of information here actually. But let's just try and expand all of it to begin with, and then we'll look at what we are interested in. So the first one here has information about the team. The second one has team statistics. So this is how many shots that the home team have, how many shots that the away team have, and so on and so on and so on. In the video, There's a media column. We're not really interested in that today. There's a coaching column. There's a skater column. And there's a goalies column. So what we're interested in is the skaters and the goaltenders. But we can't do it all at once, because if we expand this, it has to expand it to new rows. And then we have to expand this to new rows as well, and that gets really messy. So we can't do that. So we have to do it in 2 steps. So let's actually just copy this one. So we'll use this one to get data from the skaters, and then we'll use this one to get data from the goaltenders, and then we'll append the 2 tables in the end. So we'll call this one goalies. Okay, so for now we're not interested in any of the team stats or media or coaches. So in this table we'll just pick up the skaters column. Just like that. And then we can expand our skaters. And what we're interested in is the player info, and we're interested in the stats. It's not really interesting to know which player started on the ice. And status is just whether or not the player is a captain or an assistant captain. We don't want that either. So now we have these 2 columns, and we can get, let's just expand all of it. So this gives us the player ID, it gives us the first name and last name, jersey number, position, birthday, and it gives us a image URL. So you can just try and open this one, and it should be an image of the player. And then in the stats column, we can get all of the, this is a game by game stats because we're looking at game summary. So you can get how many goals, assists, points, and so on and so on and so on. But actually we're not really interested in that because we can get that information from the play-by-play as well. So in this case, we're just interested in the time on ice because we can't get that anywhere else. So let's just keep this one. So now we have the time on ice for each player in each game they played. And we have player information, age and position and so on. Now in this data, all players that were on the game report is in here, even if they didn't play any minutes. So let's just try and open this null one first. So these are players where there's some shootout details. But there's no information here, so let's just ignore that one. But it also has players that were in the on the game sheet, so to speak, but didn't play a single shift. So you have some players here. We're not really, I don't think we want to include those in our data as well. So let's just select everything except for these 2. So now we are only including players that actually played in the game. Okay, so now we'll just do the exact same for the goaltenders. So we're just interested in the goalies. And we're going to expand it. And we don't want status, but it's actually interesting to know if the goaltender was the starting goalie or not. So we'll keep the starting part here. And then we'll just expand the info. this is exactly the same info as it was in the players table. And again, in stats, you have information about goals against, shots against, so on and so on. In this case, we're just going to get the time on ice. And I think we'll rename this one to starting goaltender. And you can see when we are appending the two tables in a second, this one has to be the same name as the time on ice here. So we need to change the name to time on ice. And there's a lot of null values here. So in this data, we are including not only the goaltender that was playing, but also the backup, even if the backup doesn't get on the ice. So let's just remove all of those. So now we're only including the goaltender that actually played in the game. Okay, so now we can just append the goaltenders into this players table. So we'll just say append goalies. And you can see a new column was added. That's correct. And we can go to position and then we can say load more. And we can see now that goaltenders are included. Now, for some reason, there is one player that has no position. Maybe she played both as a forward and as a defender. I don't know. But we'll just leave it like that for now. I don't know which position is the correct one. So let's just, let's just remove this one. So we have all the information that we need here. So we can just detect data type. Let's make this one a number. I don't think it's important, but and let's just remove the link as well. We don't want that. Yes, so now we have a table with the schedule. We have a table with player information and time on ice. So the last thing we want to get is the play-by-play. And the starting point will again be this schedule table. So let's duplicate that. Let's call the table play-by-play. And let's look at this. So some of this information we're not really interested in. So let's just remove some of the columns. Home score, away score, game status, venue name. Let's keep the home team and away team. That might be interesting actually. So this is it. And we'll make this into a text. And then we need to go find the URL that we're going to use so that we can create a new column with the links, then create a function, and then invoke that function on that column, just like we did before. So let's just go back here, and then we know this one was the correct one. This says Game Center play-by-play. And it has game ID, so we just need to change the game ID from 2 to a parameter, just like we did before. So let's just copy this URL, go back to Power Query, and then we'll create a new column. Just put in the URL. And we'll change this one to the game ID column. And that's it. Okay, so now we need to create a function That's the exact same approach as before. We'll just load this. And again, it's gonna give us an error because there are those starting and ending parentheses. So we need to load it as a text file. Then we need to remove the parentheses. Just like that. Then we can drill down, we can parse it, we can convert it into a table, and now we can expand it and get all the play-by-play data. We don't want to do that just yet, we just want to create a function that does all of this. So we'll just add a new parameter. Link play-by-play. Put in the URL. We'll change the source. And now we can create a function. Function play-by-play. So the function is now created, so we can just delete this table. Don't need it anymore. And then we can invoke our function on this column. That's it. And now we can expand the data. Expand. So this gives us the play-by-play data, so it has all of the events. And then there is a lot of detail on each event. We have to click load more, otherwise you won't get all the data. And you can see there's quite a lot of information here. So we'll just load it all, and it gives us the play-by-play data. Now this is not very clean data. We have to do a lot of data cleaning, and we'll do some of it today right here in Power Query. But we can't do all of it. Some of it you would have to do in another tool, or I would recommend doing in another tool, but we won't be doing that in this video. In the next video, we'll be working in MySQL just to do a little bit of data cleaning and data transformation. But we want to do just a little bit in this video as well. So every time you have a player column, so this is the goalie coming in, then you need to expand it. And what we are interested in is actually just the player ID. So the problem when we do this is that it changes the name of the column to ID. Yeah, I don't think there's anything we can do about that. So this means that when we the period, we also want the period ID, which is the period number. So now you can see you have two ID columns, but we'll change the names afterwards. Then we'll do the same for the home player. Home player is actually the home player taking a face-off. And the visiting player is the visiting player taking the face-off. Then you have the X location and the Y location. And these are a little bit weird because the X-axis goes from 0 to 600 and the Y-axis goes from 0 to 300. This doesn't really make any sense because the ring size is 200 feet times 85 feet. So you do need to make a little bit of a conversion. So you would divide this one by 3 to get the data in feet. But the weirdest part is that this one goes to 300, this one goes to 600, even though on a PWHL rink, the length is not twice that of the width. So the conversion rate is not the same when transforming these into feet. Anyway, that's just something to be aware of, but we won't be doing any of that today. But it's just to say that the X and the Y coordinates are quite weird in the PWHL data and in the AHL data. But we just need to convert it into feet, and in the NHL data you have the middle point, the face-off dot in the middle, as the 0.0 location. And then the X goes from minus 100 to plus 100, and the Y goes from minus 42.5 to plus 42.5. So I would probably transform this into that format. But we won't be doing that today, even though it's relatively easy to do. Home win, what is that? Well, it's actually just whether or not the home player won the face-off or not. And nothing else. Then you have a shooter column. We'll just expand the player ID here. You have the goaltender column. Let's expand the player ID. You have the shooter team ID. You have a column, is it goal? You have a shot quality column. From the looks of it, this is just based on shot location. So quality is a shot from the slot area. Non-quality is a slot from the outside area. Shot type, in the NHL you have a shot type for all shots. In the PWHL you only have shot types on goals. Otherwise it just says default. Then you have a goal ID, you have, this is the team ID of the goal scoring team. You have goal scorer, goal number, which is actually just the, I think this is the count of number of goals the player has scored in the season up until this point. So I don't think we'll include this one in the data today. Then we have the scorer. Let's just pick the ID. You have an assist column. Now the problem is that some goals have 2 assists, so this will expand to new rows, and we're not interested in doing that because it will mess up the data. So we need to do something about the assist, but for now we'll just keep it as it is. You have the assist numbers. Again, that's just how many goals have, how many assists does this player have in the season up until this point. Then we have the properties. Let's expand that. So this gives us information about what kind of a goal it was. Was it a power play goal, empty net goal, shorthanded goal, so on. Then you have plus minus players. You only have that on goals, but this column will also expand to new rows, just like the assist one. So you can see for each goal you have 5 players, or up to 5 players. So we need to expand this not to new rows, but we want to expand it to new columns, but that's a little bit complicated. And it's the same thing with the minus players, but we'll get back to that. Then we have the penalty taking team. we have the player taking the penalty. We have the player serving the penalty. We don't have the player drawing the penalty. We do have that information in the NHL data, but we don't have that here. We have whether or not the penalty resulted in a power play or not. Was it a bench minor? And finally, we have a column here called shooter team. But this is actually just the team of a penalty shot shooter. So there's only a team ID here when it's a shootout, or maybe even on a penalty shot within the game, I don't know. But in a shootout, for sure, you have the team ID of the shooter. Okay, so now we have a lot of IDs, so we need to rename all of those columns. So let's just do that. So this one was goalie coming in. And actually there's no information in the goalie going out. It's just a completely empty column. In the AHL data, you do have that information as well. So we'll just leave it in. Maybe they'll add it later on. We have this one was period. This was home player. Let's just say face-off. Just it's only on the face-off we're talking about the home player. This was away player. Face-off. Location. This one was. So what was this one? This one was shooter. This was the goalie. This was the goal scoring team. Let's just call it scorer team. This was the scorer. And then we have all of these goal types. Let's just say power play goal, short-handed goal, empty net goal, let's say penalty shot goal, insurance goal. I don't know what to abbreviate that to, so let's just keep it. Game winning goal. And then we have the plus players, minus players. We'll leave them as they are right now. Here we have the penalty taking team. Let's just call it pen team. You would definitely do some more cleaning on this afterwards anyway. So for now, it's just we're just giving them names to ensure that you understand what it is, and then you can clean it afterwards. So this was the, let's say, taken by, served by, and finally we have the, I don't know, let's call it team on shootouts. Okay, so now we've changed the names and we've expanded everything. So the next part I want to look into is how can we get this information not by expanding to new rows, but instead we want to expand it to new columns so that we have one column for each player that was on the ice for the team scoring the goal. This is a little bit complicated and I'm not 100% sure why this works, but I found the formula on the internet and it does work and I understand how it works, so I assume that's the most important part. So we'll just add a new step right after here. And then I'll just put it in here. So it's a table transform. Let's say transform instead. Table transform columns. And we're going to use this one as the table. So it just takes the table from the last step over here. That's what this means. And then we need to do a transformation on the, let's start with the plus players. So it's doing the transformation on that column. And what we want to do is we want to use the each list transform. And we're going to do that on the underscore. This is just how the syntax works in Power Query. Underscore, and then for each list, I will explain the function after. Will explain the formula afterwards. The best I can do, we'll take the record field, underscore, and the record that we're interested in is the ID record. And this is it. So let's just run it and then we'll explain it afterwards. So let's see what happened here. Okay, so here you have the plus players. So it says error in all the empty rows. But down here you see a list. So now we have a list of player IDs compared to in the minus column, we have a list of records, and then each record holds information about player IDs, name, and so on and so on and so on. So basically what our function does, our step right here, what that does is instead of having a list of records, we now have a list of player IDs. So this is important because now we can, instead of expanding to new rows, we can extract the values because now we have a list of values. But let's just start off by doing the same for the minus players and the assist players. So let's just copy this one and let's create a new step, put it in, and then instead of having this, we'll just say custom 1, meaning it takes the table from the custom 1 step. And then instead of doing this on the plus players, we'll do it on the minus players. Let's just copy it and say enter. So now we did the same on the minus players, and finally we need to do the same on the assists. So let's just copy it in and say now the previous step was custom 2. And the column is now assists. Let's hit enter. And it should work here. So there was only 1 assist on this particular goal, but sometimes there'll be 2. Okay, so you have a lot of errors. Let's just ignore those for now. We'll remove them afterwards. But now we can actually extract the values. So we can say extract, and then we'll just put in a space between each value. So now it extracted the player ID here, and then we'll do the same for the plus players and the minus players. So let's just say extract values, put in space as the delimiter. So now you can see these were the 5 players on the ice for this goal, and they are just there's just a delimiter of a space in between each value. So let's just do the same for the minus players. And now we have something that we can use. So there's a function on here that is a split column. So now we can split the column based on a delimiter. So let's just use space as the delimiter and don't quote anything. So now it takes each of the minus players and puts them into a new column. What happened here? Why do we only have 2 columns? So clearly there's 5 players there, right? Let's just try it again. I don't know what happened. That's super weird. Let's just try it over here, see if it works here. I don't know why I don't think there's usually a number here. Maybe if you leave it blank, it works. No? Okay, doesn't matter. Let's just put in 5. We know that there's 5 players, so I don't think it usually does this, but apparently we need to say 5. And now we have 5 columns. Then we'll do the same with this one. Remove the quotes. Split into 5 columns. Yes, it works. And then we'll do the same for the assists. Split it into 2 columns. And it works. So now we have the primary assist here, the secondary assist here, and we also have a lot of errors, but let's just remove all of those because those are just empty entries anyway. Oh, it's because I didn't remove the errors before I expanded them to new columns. That's why there's a problem. So ideally we would just remove the errors before we extracted the values, then there would be no problem. And so let's just do this, but it works in this, what should I say, in this order as well. But let's just say replace errors and then replace them with null values. So now we have the information in separate columns rather than on separate rows. And it is a little bit complicated, but at least it works. I'm not really sure I want to do any more, right? Oh, we need to remove the errors here as well. Replace errors with null. And that's it. So there's a lot of other things you need to do in order to get this data more clean and more ready for usage. But we don't want to do much more right now. Now, one thing I just want to mention is that whenever there's a goal, you do have duplicate values in the data set. So let's just go here. Okay, so here we have a goal, but the shot above the goal is actually also a goal. So let's just take a look at this. So you can see the time is the exact same, and you can see the location is the exact same. And you can see there's a shooter, but there's no shooter when the entry is goal. But there is a shooter when the event is a shot. That is also a goal. So you can see it's a goal right here. So you have to take care of that somehow as well. So you need to combine these two rows somehow. So that you have all the information in just one row. That makes a lot more sense. But anyway, we won't be doing more right now. We'll just leave it as it is. Let's just detect data type, and let's just remove the columns that we're not really interested in. So let's remove the link. We could remove this one as well. There's nothing in there. Let's remove this one and assist numbers. And I think we'll just keep it as it is right now. And now we can load all of the data. So let's just, to start with, let's just create the connection, and then we can load the tables that we're actually interested in. Okay, so we have these four tables here, and we're interested in the schedule, we're interested in the players table. The goalies we're not interested in because that information is already appended into the players table. So let's just try and load these one at a time. Let's put it in a table, put it in a new worksheet, and add it to the data model as well. Fine, it works. We have the schedule here. Let's do the same, put it into a table. And this takes a little while because now we're not calling an API, we're actually scraping data from the different websites. So it's not that slow, but it does take a little while. So now we have all the player information, including time on ice for each game. And finally, we'll get the play-by-play data. Again, this does need quite a lot of data cleaning, but we won't be doing that today. This was more about getting data from the PWHL and not so much about cleaning the data. But as I said, you can do this for the PWHL, but it also works from the AHL website. It's the exact same stats provider, so it's set up the exact same way. And now we have the play-by-play data set up the way we want. Again, it's not very clean, and we forgot to change the time, so now it says something weird. We might want to keep this as a text, but so let's go here. The time, it was changed into a time. Let's keep it as a text. Now it's easier to read. Anyway, that's what we wanted to do in this video. And this was the last video about getting data. It's just to illustrate that it's actually quite easy to get data from the PWHL website and the AHL website. It's just a little bit complicated to clean and work with the data, but getting the data itself is quite easy to do.